natural, healthy response to fear. And I've asked audiences all over the world, when a deer gets afraid, it runs away. When a bird gets afraid, it flies away. When a mouse gets afraid, it burrows. When a lion gets afraid, it charges. And I'll say to the audience, what do you think humans are supposed to do when they're afraid? And people look at me kind of confused. They understand the question, but they're not quite sure what the answer is. And then I show them research with chimpanzees, showing what chimps do in the laboratory and in the wild, because they have the same emotional brain we do. And they, even in the wild, when they're afraid, they run to each other. And then I'll say to the audience, what do your children do when they had their first nightmare or thunderstorm when they were little? And every mother in the room says the same thing. Without 1 day's training, that child ran to our bed. I held the child, said it's only a nightmare, as if that word meant anything to the child. And the child fell right back to sleep in their arms. That the human response to fear is to reach to another for support. But what makes stress disorders is someone who has fear and either is suppressing it, depressing it, afraid to admit they're afraid, and who learned in childhood not to go to parents when they were afraid, and now is spending a lifetime protecting themselves from other people rather than reaching for other people.
Well, now to bring in this philosophy then when it comes to fear, you say now we have to ask the small questions.
Yes.
Ask the small, I triple starred and capitalized this one. Not only ask the small questions, because that will tiptoe past fear,
Right.
but the painfully hard questions, especially towards the self, are a toxic mental blow. And by that I mean, as you say in the book, such questions as, why am I such a jerk? How could I be so stupid? Why is everyone better than me? Why is everyone's life easier than mine? And I went, wait a minute. Those are all of my favorite questions. That's what I'm constantly doing to myself. That it seems like it's hard to stop because you read the paper, you go, oh look, this guy's life is better than mine. We're comparing ourselves to everyone. So you say it's particularly important when we ask these questions about ourselves to really ask small questions, tipping toe past that fear. Give me some examples then, when someone is looking at themselves as feeling like a jerk, what type of a question should they be asking themselves?
Right. Well, to back up for a minute, the reason why those questions are so dangerous is for reasons no one understands. The brain cannot reject a question. Any question you ask repeatedly, the brain is forced to take in and start storing information. So if you go through the day on a fairly regular basis asking, why am I such a loser? What's wrong with me? The brain assumes this must be important and starts collecting all this garbage about every flaw, real and imagined and exaggerated, every mistake, no matter how far back. And so the brain's storing all this because you've programmed it to pay attention to that. The good news is you change the questions, you change what the brain stores. So a big question for many people is, what is it I love about me? Or who could I love and who loves me? Or what am I grateful for? Sometimes we have to break it down into even smaller, more trivial questions. What am I grateful for this moment? What am I happy about at this instant? What's good about me at this instant? So people focus on it a minute or two at a time. But the beauty of it is the brain's getting used to the question. And so after a while, the brain's going through the days storing information about what you're grateful about, who loves you, who you could love, so that next time you ask the question, the brain's already got the information for you.
And you tell us there's a natural bridge to this, in fact, that again was one of those little aha light bulbs that came up, and that was that oftentimes the person who is the most self-critical is actually kinder to others. So in a sense, if they would look at the way they would think of others and start using those little questions to think about themselves, they almost have the tools there. They're just not directing it inward towards themselves. If I can be as kind to others as I am to myself in this case, there would be a tremendous improvement.
Yeah, and the reason is because of those brains, that often that harshness we learned growing up from parents who may not have been harsh with us, although sometimes are, but they were harsh with themselves or with each other, and the brain is building in that harsh criticalness the way it builds in a Southern accent or a Bostonian accent. Whereas the cortex, the thinking brain, it knows to be kind and charitable and forgiving and accepting of others. So you can have people who are very generous to others and very harsh with themselves because they're operating out of separate brains.
You know, I find that, again, when people are harsh with themselves, they're oftentimes most resistant to wanting to make change.
Yes.
And there was something interesting you said about your own profession. I want to get it exactly because I thought if people could hear this way, I think more people would seek the help they need. And it was this: for us to view therapy as a journey requiring courage and stamina, not a procedure needed because we are flawed and need fixing. Because that is the thing that most people fear, is they're flawed, they need fixing, and yet they have to admit that and then go to a doctor to be fixed. It's a little hard. But when you again ask that small question, look at it with a kinder, gentler heart as a journey, it makes it easier for the person to let go and let someone help them or let something help them, you know, get more participation from the outside world.
Yes. And to see each of the issues in their life as a classroom or opportunity to learn, and then again breaking it down into small trivial steps, the Kaizen way, so that you can learn it in a way that's enjoyable and interesting and free of fear.
Now, let me ask you another thing that I've always had problems with. Oh, come on, doctor. This is a free $60 I'm getting here, right? Maybe 100 in a good doctor like you, maybe even more. Mind sculpture.
Yes.
And guidance and imagery. That I'm still, even in your book, I had trouble playing any of those exercises. For some reason, I can resist guided imagery and mind sculpture with the best of them. Tell me, what's up, Doc?
Well, the reason for why there's so many different exercises in the book is people tend to have a preference for one kind as another. For you, again, even before you knew about Kaizen, you were breaking things down into small steps.
Right, and I had no problem with that.
problem.
That I found very easy, very enjoyable, and very long-lasting.
Yes. But for some people, even small steps are too scary or too difficult or boring. So for those people, we found this concept of mind sculpture from a book by the same name when they looked at people like Lance Armstrong, Michael Jordan, people who had injuries or disease and yet were able to keep on training. The way they did it, a Lance Armstrong person, for example, would be lying in a hospital bed with a cancer-fighting drug coming through his arm in an IV, and picturing himself not on a movie screen the way we used to teach guided imagery, but instead literally seeing himself on the bike, pedaling away furiously. Now, I was reading this book, Mind Sculpture, on a plane, closed the book, and pretended I was in the health club lifting weights, not in an airplane at 37,000 feet. And with my hands on the seat, and pictured the people around me and the free weights on the ground, lifting them, and could feel my muscles tense and the stomach get tense and the breathing increase. And you're literally burning about 25% of the calories you'd be burning in the gym. Because in some ways, Barry, the brain is so stupid with your eyes closed, it doesn't know where it is and is sending perfect messages to the body. So there's all kinds of research on this now, that it's a wonderful way for some people to train themselves to begin moving in the right direction, and particularly for a goal that's really scary for them.
Now, one of the keys as well to the small step is the small amount of time.
Yes.
You think we need to start, and again, that's also something I incorporated, as I said. Can I get a co-written by? No. As I said, when I undertook the exercise regime that I was just never doing, the time commitment too, I made sure was very, very small in the beginning. Eventually it grew anyway because I was enjoying it more and wanted it to grow. But that's another key issue. Make these commitments, make them small, and make the time they take very small.
Yes. What you're trying to do is to make the time so small you couldn't possibly have any resistance to doing it. My favorite way to get people to begin exercising that are overweight and depressed and overwhelmed with life's demands is one commercial a night or two commercials. Stand up and move as fast as you can during the commercial so that your body's getting used to the idea of beginning to move. And then what happens after time is you slowly increase the amount of minutes, but as you experience, at a certain point you forget to stop because you've developed an interest and an appetite for moving your body.
Now, two small things that you say are very important and a little bit to the side of what we're talking about are these words: I apologize and thank you. In an example you gave in regards to a work environment and a doctor-patient environment, but again, I think we can extrapolate into our own personal small steps we take. I've always found that I apologize